Me again, Tony Buglass, Methodist minister, thinking about the apostles, the disciples, and today I'm thinking about John. John was probably the youngest and probably lasted the longest. How do I know he was the youngest? Well, he was the only one of the men that was there at the cross. When Jesus was arrested, all the others legged it. They disappeared. They were scared. Well, they would be, because if their boss, their leader, was arrested for whatever treasonable offence the Romans wanted him for, how did they know the Romans weren't going to come for them as well? So they took cover. Young John was there with the women when Jesus was crucified. Why? Because he was just a lad. He was a young'un. As far as the Romans were concerned, he wasn't a problem. And you can get clues. If you read the stories about the disciples and Jesus in the Gospels, you can get clues as to possibly he was a young'un. James and John, there's that story where they're on their way back from Galilee, heading back to Jerusalem, and they pass the Samaritan village, and the Samaritan village don't want to let Jesus in. This is because this is just after that incident with the Gadarene swine, where Jesus cast out a demon and all the pigs ran it. The, the Samaritans were nervous. They didn't want this guy in their village. James and John, they were furious. Lord, are you going to call down thunder and lightning from heaven and show them what's what? There's a bit elsewhere in the other list of the apostles where James and John are nicknamed the sons of thunder. I think that's when that nickname was given. Jesus turned and looked at them. In Luke's gospel, it just says he rebuked them. That's a bit heavy. I think Jesus would have looked at them and said, yeah, right pair of thunderers you two, aren't you? That's what sons of thunder would mean in Aramaic or Hebrew. Yeah, right pair you are. Do you want me to leave a trail of smoke and craters all the way between Galilee and Jerusalem just because somebody didn't do what I wanted? By the time he's done that, they've got the message. They're laughing. Everybody laughs with them. On they go. Lesson learned, nobody heard. So, young lads, pair of hotheads, yeah, could well be. The interesting thing is, as the stories continue on into the Acts of the Apostles, we don't hear much about John. He surfaces again right at the very end of the century. Book of Revelation. It was written around about 95 AD. It was written because the Emperor Domitian had said he was going to exterminate Christians, boot them out the empire. He didn't want any Christians in the empire. So the book of Revelation was written to say, essentially, if you declare war on the sons of God, the people of God, this is what God will do to you and Rome. We won't go into that. That's a whole other story. But the heart of that book is visions that John received when he was a prisoner on the island of Patmos. Patmos was a penal colony, a labor camp. Think of the Roman Empire version of Siberia, the Gulag. It was a mining colony. So the prisoners were put there and they had to dig stuff out of the ground, and it was hard work. So John was there, he tells us, for preaching the word. He was arrested, he was thrown in prison. Much, much later, he's released and he turns up in Ephesus. Ephesus is a major Christian center in Asia Minor. And there, by now, he's an old man. We're getting into the 80s and 90s of the first century. So the lad who was a teenager, a kid in the 30s, is now getting on a bit. And he's probably, as far as we can tell, the last survivor of all of those who knew Jesus for real. So people will be saying to him, tell us about him. What was he really like, this Jesus? Yeah, we've heard the stories. We've got the Gospels, because Mark and Matthew and Luke had already written theirs. We've heard those stories. But you remember him. What was he really like? And when he said this sort of thing, what did he actually mean? So John told the stories. And with the help of another John, John the Elder, the fellow that wrote the three letters, he wrote his Gospel. And that's quite an amazing piece of text. It's like the other three, but very unlike the other three. The flavour is different, the style is different. It's as if he's boiled it all down and stirred it all together, and here are stories full of reflection on what Jesus meant. And then we've got one final reflection. A man called Papias, one of the early church fathers, he was a big preacher in the early second century. When he was a young lad, He remembered seeing John as a very old man in Ephesus. He remembers seeing this old fella brought in, carried in, too frail to say much or do much. And when they said, "What's your message for us?" he said, "Little children, love one another." That's it. That's the heart of it. It's not all of it, but if you haven't got that, you haven't got the rest. So it's as if that's the foundation on which the rest of it is built. That's distilled from the memories that we've got in the gospel and in everything else he would have told them. The bottom line, little children, love one another. If that's the heart of a lifetime of discipleship, not a bad place for folk like us to start in our thinking. Thank you, John.